Good morning, Quasar Markets Live. I hope everyone had a fantastic week. We are opening up to blood in the streets, so to speak. The markets are definitely starting in the red across the board. We currently see our futures markets down about 3.5% on the NASDAQ here, back down around 511. You can see around 6 a.m. we did hit lows closer to 501, quite frankly, before we've seen a nice climb back this morning. Most of this news has been based upon the release of a China AI app called DeepSeek. It seems to have really spooked the markets. Investor sentiment is at a low we haven't seen in somewhere around 20 weeks, down in that 32, 33 level on the what we call the fear and greed indicator. So this could be a buy the dip type of day personally for me. We've been talking about waiting for a dip. This looks like a pretty good one. Not saying I'm jumping in first thing this morning and doing it. I'm actually leaning towards my first trade of the day, maybe being to short the VIX. As we know, the VIX is a index from the SIBO that looks at volatility, and it has spiked up about 40% overnight, 44%. And those of you that were listening to me, I told you I was buying some and did that back on Friday when it was trading just below $15. You can see it's at 21.32 here. I am already out of that position, and I am now looking to actually short the VIX here today. It just, it has room to run. It could run here, so I'm not running, but it is a trade that I'm definitely going to watch this morning, especially on any approach back up towards that 23-24 line. I really like a short on the VIX at that level, but volatility is definitely in play. Most of it based again around this, AI. It's the number one app downloaded now on the Apple App Store, and we'll get much more into it throughout the day. But the big takeaway is supposedly it took a lot less money to train. Not that really matters, and that's very much in question depending on the analysts or news paper you look at to see news on it. What everyone can agree on is it cost about 14 cents to get the same amount of coverage that you're paying $20 a month on for ChatGPT and the others. So a lot of talk. It's open source to those that have some knowledge of developers. It's open source means they're sharing their code with the world. It's huge in the blockchain. Another thing that I think blockchain and crypto did is it's pushed more and more of the world into the world of what we call open source, where you share your code so people can give their advice, their input. Hey, if you had done this way, maybe it would have worked better, or maybe it would take less energy. But the big takeaways are supposedly this is using a lot less energy. So energy stocks definitely beat down. It can run on a regular computer as opposed to the huge supercomputers that some of these AI models and especially large language learning models are using here in the US. So we'll see how this plays out. I heard it, I think it was on CNBC. I was listening to a few channels this morning, so I don't want to give credit where it's not due. It was either CNBC or Bloomberg. And they compared this to sort of the rocket race when Sputnik was announced. The US, who thought they had this huge lead in the world of space, found out they didn't maybe have this huge lead in space. But then what happened there, right? Kennedy got that thing going. NASA gave a lot of money to it, and we blew away the rest of the world when it came to space exploration. Do we see that's what's happening in AI? As we know, Stargate already in track. We already see that spending here in the U.S. So to me, it was more of a wake-up moment this morning than a long-term fear that we're too far behind China to catch up or anything else there. That's why I am more of a buy the dip type situation than thinking that we see a continued slide. Foreign markets overnight, we'll talk about that. As you guys know, I like to get us through most of the stuff that happened before we wake up, before we get into this morning. But we can see that news spooked the Nikkei even more so than it did here in the U.S. stock markets. They are currently down closer to 4%. They were down even further overnight. The Nikkei retracing all the way to its 200-day MA here, erasing almost a week of gains that it had seen on this news. And again, the big part of that is that they won't need as many chips from Japan, and that they're falling behind, China in this field. I was a little surprised. Thought I'd see a move up by the Shanghai Composite, the largest mainland Chinese index that we take a look at. The Hong Kong market gets covered under a different indice. But I thought we'd see maybe a bigger jump here out of the Shanghai Composite. I do wonder, my view of that is maybe even folks overseas, maybe they're not buying the news yet. You know what I mean? Is that let's see if this deep seek really is everything it's meant to be. We saw this right when we talked with Stephen Flanagan, and he'll be back on at 10 today, Mr. Currency himself. That the Japanese yen didn't make a huge move on Friday after, the Japanese, the Bank of Japan had actually raised rates, and didn't have the huge move like we had seen in July when they made a similar action to that. Not seeing this huge move out of Shanghai leads me to believe that the Chinese markets aren't really buying that news yet. So, and then overseas in Europe, the stocks is down about 0.5%. It had retraced much further since about 6 a.m. or so. It's made a nice climb back up. So again, everything really dropped off. And I think as news is sort of getting acclimated, and this is why I'm also thinking as a buy the dip buyer today, as opposed to playing a continuation to the downside, is we are seeing things bounce back like that. The other one that I was taking a look at that did the similar thing was the crypto market. Bitcoin broke down all the way down to about 97,000 overnight. I'm in the wrong spot here. There we go. Broke down to 97,000 overnight, hitting that spot again just around 6 a.m. It first hit it around 2:30 and then around 6 a.m. But you can see the continued climb up that we've generally seen here since that news. Bitcoin regained 100K. So that buy the dip opportunity sort of already dissipated. I did not do it this time. I normally would have. It went quick. As you can see here in this 7 o'clock time frame, it made a pretty big move up. And partly what we're seeing is liquidations move. I had put in here that, you could see some more volatility today. That's starting to already play out. Let's take a look and see what it's done to the crypto futures numbers here as we quickly pull it in. Actually, I want to go all the way back to here. So we do see open interest at about $140 billion. That's actually slightly up from where we were when I did this morning. And we see the 24-hour liquidations are close to $900 million. So, a couple of takeaways there. It's not scaring traders. Traders are not running from the markets on the crypto side. In fact, we're seeing an increase this morning as traders are waking up. We're seeing more money move into the perpetual futures. What we also have seen over the last hour or so is, people using too much leverage, thinking this continuation to the short side is going to continue, got wrecked pretty quickly there. And you can see how here, it moved from all of the liquidations being in green. If you're looking sort of the bottom left side here, green means that longs were liquidated in this case, and these only cover accounts up over $100,000 that got liquidated. But what we see is that switched over here right around 7:30 this morning, and a bunch of overly zealous shorters, bears, got hit pretty hard here. So, that's why I did point out volatility still definitely in play in the crypto markets. That open interest is still there. Funding rates, we should take a quick look at that also. I will point out over the last 24 hours, a skew to the downside, or 52% of the futures trades done over the last 24 hours were shorts, not longs. Not surprising there at all based upon, what we saw. Let's take a look here at open interest. And we can see still really high here. Open interest, $142 billion. So still a lot of money, and that's climbed up significantly this morning. So you do want to keep that in mind. Funding rates, let's take a look at the funding rates. Mostly in the green. So we still see more folks are buying the dip here this morning. In general, funding rates are in the green here. It means more people are open to the upside than the downside. So it costs more to open a long trade than a short trade. So crypto markets looking like they're trying to bounce back this morning. Definitely seems like anything under $100,000, it becomes a buy the dip opportunity here. So that seems to be in place so far this morning, and we'll keep an eye and see what happens there. Looking at the rest of sort of commodities here. Take a look at gold and silver. They had been, now they're down. So, and it's interesting. We're seeing that reversal already happen across a lot of these. Gold had made a nice move up. It tried to break to the all-time high again. It just can't do it right now. It can't get across 27.90. It got back up to 27.72 here overnight and dropped right back down from that level. And it's been in that pretty tight zone that we've talked about here. Daily chart in between that like 26.50 and 27.50 areas where we've spent most of the last 2 weeks. What I do say is I've seen a little bit of it does have a nice little of a consolidation looking to try to break to that all-time high. I'm not doubting it yet. I did talk about it on Friday, shorting it when it got up to that level again. In full transparency, I didn't make a trade on it at all. I stayed out of all markets over the weekend, took the time to sort of regroup and just relax. I was neutral on everything except for my NVIDIA, which definitely took a downturn. I'm not worried there. As I said, that is a much longer term play that I'm still in. In fact, NVIDIA, I did take the advantage this morning and bought the dip a little bit more to cost average down. And I'll give you that figure. I didn't actually look at it this morning, what it brought my cost average down. I was at 142.50. But this brought it down, so I will take a look at that and give you those numbers. Silver still unable to break that 31 also. So, while we've seen some strength here in the metals markets, what I'd say is you're starting to get a little bit of fatigue. We just can't break that same mark. And, especially when we see that in crypto and Bitcoin, it becomes something to worry about. So we'll see, does this consolidation, is there, and silver one worries me a little bit more. It has had this 200-day MA just below it that's been holding it up, but it definitely has had even more of a struggle than gold. Gold seems to make it to that 27.90. Sell-off's a little bit more intense, brings it down towards 26.50 or so, and then it regains steam and continues to try. It can't get across there. What we see on silver is it can't get across 31, gets back down to 30.25 or so, and then it just does it again, and it stays in that zone. Seems to be more zone bitten than a true resistance there. Nat gas, and I do have to check these as they're going because I started pretty early this morning that these numbers are still consistent. So nat gas actually now down over 5%. It was down over 4% this morning. Was trading right about that 380 handle. When I started this morning, now down at that 370 handle. So nat gas continuing to pull back here. We could start to, that's one you could start to look to buy the dip here. Again, I'd be looking more on a drop towards this 50-day MA, which has me at about 353 as a zone that I would like to maybe pick up some net gas in that zone. I'm not really a buyer or a seller at its current level. When it comes to gas, I did notice at my pumps over the weekend that gas was down, and it did translate a little bit into what we've seen here over the last several days. We know basically starting on January 16th, we've seen a steady decline across oil prices after they, Brent sort of maxed out towards the 82 level, and WTI, it was more at that 80 level, where it sort of maxed out, and it has been dropping since. So we'll see what we get there. Not a buyer or seller there either right now. More looking at, would be a buyer more in that 70 zone. So sort of in the energy area, I think it's sort of in no man's land for me. I don't scalp it very much, so it's not really a play that I'm looking at today. For that Forex, I won't get too much into that because we've got our man Stephen Flanagan coming on in about 45 minutes to go over it. But I will point out the DXY has continued to fade a little bit here, breaking down. It had gotten just under the 107 level earlier this morning, but it had picked up a little bit of steam from that level. Key zone that Mr. Flanagan told us to keep an eye on was that 106.60 area. Didn't make it that low yet. And the bigger move there, or biggest move, normally what we had seen is a lot of the moves down on the DXY here over the last 2 weeks had been mostly exasperated or made in reference to moves up by the euro and sterling. Not the case today. The Japanese yen has finally made that move that we talked about here, and you can see the big drop happen here today. So, we talked about it on Friday. We really looked for money to move first, and, seeing that, would have expected to sort of see that on Friday. It more played out over the weekend, and we see ourselves in this 154 area right now, breaking below the 50-day MA and sort of giving that rounding top that Mr. Flanagan was talking about. So we'll get more into Forex for sure later on. When we look at what's dropping the most today, it is tech in general and energy. Energy actually now looks like it's down even more. And some of the sort of biggest laggards that I saw, I do have those here. Got to start with the laggards today. Some of the biggest laggards were GE, Verona. In fact, actually, let's just pull it up. But they were GE, Verona, Marvell, Broadcom, NVIDIA, Constellation, Amphenol, Arista were all down double digits. And as you can see here, still down. GE, Verona down almost 17%. Energy company, basically Vistra, which is nuclear energy based, down almost 16.5%. Constellation Energy, which we know again has signed deals with a lot of these data centers to provide their energy, down 16%. Marvell down, 12, almost 13%. NVIDIA down 12%. So we see a big drop across those two sectors, and it just keeps going. You see, basically almost 5% losses. Microsoft, Palantir, Train Technologies, Micron, Dell, ASML, ARM, Oracle, everything that was up, really big last week is getting hit really hard today on this news. And we've talked about it here, right? We've been warning more so about these energy companies, especially when it came to nuclear energy, these AI names, that, they don't have the earnings so far to support some of the valuations they are. That's not the case when you get to some of the chip companies and Oracle and some of these others. Oracle more, I think, is under a little bit of a threat today because, again, they do a lot of the database storage for companies like TikTok and others. Does this bite into their business there? I don't think the narrative is, nearly. I think this is an overreaction in my own personal opinion. And, I'm going to let this settle down, but I'm more looking to buy this dip as to then to look for the continuation again. With that being said, we do have a lot of earnings on tap this week. We'll start to go through those, but some of them are the ones that are actually giving a little bit of, are the leaders this morning. AT&T had earnings this morning. Let me pull up that information here. But they are up about 3.35% this morning. And I will point out there are a couple of chip companies that are up, or semiconductor companies, NXPI, Microchip Technology, MCHP up there. So that was a little interesting. And on the energy side, Duke Energy is up about 1.75, Centerpoint Energy up 2.56. So we'll try to take a look a little more into why those two or three are sort of bucking the trend there. But they definitely were, it's been few and far between. It does, seem to me that earnings are going to have to really be impressive this week. And there is a large swath of earnings on track this week. First, let's get into the economic calendar, because that will be important this week. Also, we do have today new home sales. I don't think that's going to be a big one way or the other, although we will talk more about it. DR Horton saw a downgrade today, and that stock was down a little over 1% DHI. Yeah, still down about 1.04% here this morning. And that was just basically an analyst report from JP Morgan that said, they have more headwinds, which I don't think anybody didn't already know. So didn't do a huge amount of drop on that news, but they were getting hit a little bit by that today. Tomorrow, we start to see the bigger data come in. We get durable goods orders. We get one of Big Beat's favorites, and he will be back tomorrow with us, by the way. The S&P Case-Shiller Home Price Index is one that he likes, along with consumer confidence. And then Wednesday, we get the big one, right? FOMC interest rate, which I don't think is really much of a surprise or in play right now. It's again, I haven't looked at FedWatch this morning, but it was at about 99.5% chance of no change last time I looked on Friday. Today we're looking at 97.3. So there has been a little move to a few traders thinking there could be a rate cut here, but the vast majority all believing that we'll sit there at the current rate. I do think it's important that we have what's called advanced U.S. trade balance in goods and retail inventories and wholesale inventories coming in that same day. So should give us a little bit of a channel check into what's going on with these companies. So that could help. And then we know Mr. Powell is going to speak after the FOMC numbers or interest rate news hits. And then we have initial jobless claims, as always, on Thursday. And of course, I moved my thing here. We also have pending home sales on Thursday. And then on Friday, we have employment cost index, personal income and personal spending, otherwise known as the PCE index. And lastly, we have PMI, which is the Chicago Business Barometer. Again, we look for that to be above 50 when markets are expanding, below 50 when they are not. So that's where we are sitting so far with economic data. Like I mentioned, we do, most of the news today is based around DeepSeek, the China-based AI assistant, which is become the most downloaded app on Apple Store, has investors very spooked today. So we'll keep an eye on what that does to the tech sector. We are about 6 minutes from the open. Tick has been negative most of the day. Advanced decline very much to the decline side here, about 2,400. And again, with that being before open, I'd be looking for a number closer to 4,500 on that if this is the continued look we have at open. Good morning, Zora. Hope you had a fantastic weekend. Thanks for checking in there on YouTube with us. tick, like I said, staying negative. Dow, SPY, QQQ all look to be opening to the downside. NASDAQ, the one that's down the most at about 3.53% here this morning. Trading was right around 501 earlier, traded up to 511. And we can see it starting to get a little bit of top heavy here. So we'll see what we get as we get into the open. But I am looking at a buy the dip day. As I mentioned, part of that is because of what we saw with drops across crypto quickly getting bought back up. Bitcoin now challenging to get back above 101 after being down around 97 overnight. So I do think that gives us a good cursor that we could start to see as people digest the news and realize, just because this app has shown great promise in the first couple of days, number one, let people pour through some of that open source code and see if there's anything there that catches anyone's eye. And then, a lot of, in fact, I don't want to give the wrong info here. Hold it one second, because I forget the analyst that was talking about, not really trusting some of these numbers out of China when it comes to it. I do have to point out that you do see the first couple of analysts coming out and saying that they are not necessarily buying that dip. So while I am going to look at it, I'm looking at it more for a scalp than a longer term trade here. Mizuho desk-based analyst Jordan Klein said this AI narrative is crowded and up this much. The damage could take a while to fully play out, he wrote, adding that technology stocks were under heavy pre-market pressure in the wake of the concerns about DeepSeek's efficiencies. The Chinese AI service reportedly built itself up using far less computing hardware than semiconductors investors would have thought that was required. To me, it definitely feels like he's saying feels like an overreaction with more smoke versus fire, but that training teaches a model based on data. And if that comes down tremendously, they won't need all these chips. I don't buy it. Number one, I don't believe any news that sort of comes out of China when it comes to cost analysis, where their GDP is at, what their growth rates are at, sort of things like that. I do think that those. Hey, Mr. Flanagan, good to see you this morning also, my friend. Thank you for checking in on YouTube. We got a lot to talk about. Looks like we were right that yen was going to drop, but we would have thought that it happened on Friday. It took a couple of days, but we see that moving now here today. We do have earnings, like I said, on tap. I wasn't all that excited with anything today. SoFi was up. AT&T already went. Nucor, I guess, would be the one we sort of want to watch to see if the nuclear energy sector, what they have to say. So Nucor could be one to keep an eye on this morning. Let's see if they've already released. They haven't. They're after hours, but they have earnings today. So this is, steel sector. I'm going to be keeping an eye on Nucor today. AT&T we know already went. SoFi was the other one that sort of caught my eye today. Not a huge day of earnings. They did already hit their earnings. They're down about 10%. So I'm going to say, oh, well, that's interesting. SoFi down about 10.88%. We're going to have to read more into this because that's with their EPS hitting 29 cents when it was expected to be at 3.5 cents. So a 725 beat to the upside, and their top line revenue up 9.56%, stock down 11%. So that is interesting to me. I don't see, let me quickly try to do a search here, see if I find any of the news why that would be the case. It's funny, I didn't see any headline news across CNBC or Bloomberg this morning on it either. So they also could have just released. We're about 1 minute from the open. Okay. It looks like forward guidance seems to be the issue there. Sorry, just trying to digest it here. It says what it's looking for is they are now looking for the first quarter of this year adjusted net revenue between 725 million to 745 million, earnings of about 3 cents per share, when the street had them figured in for about 5 cents of EPS per share. So it looks like forward guidance is, like we've talked about, one of the most important things to keep an eye on here. And theirs is looking to the downside. They did say 2024 was their best year to date. But again, forward guidance is what seems like it's going to matter on a down day like today. So we definitely want to keep an eye there on that. NASDAQ holding up in this 511 area so far as we are now open. Let's see what we get here at the open. And as I mentioned, I did already buy some NVIDIA this morning, and I am looking more to a buy the dip than a continued slide here, but I want to see how this plays out over the first 15-20 minutes of the trading day before I make that exact call here. Tick is opening up slightly positive here, 231. So first clicks seem to be to the upside so far. Advanced decline down about 2,200. So actually not as bad as I thought there so far. Advanced decline not moving down. And we're actually seeing QQQ make a run above 512 here. So our first initial reaction is a buy the dip here. But again, as we've talked about, these algorithms that kick in tend to reverse here quickly. Let's see what we get. Bitcoin now above 101, so it is giving some wins here. We're down about 3% on the QQQ. Advanced decline right around 2,100, so we actually saw an advantage. So it looks like most of the stocks that were trading in the pre-markets were the ones that were getting hit the most. Ones that were trading up in pre-market are continuing to trade up. Let's take a look at the Mag 7 here. NVIDIA at 126.35, down about 11.5%. Apple, the only of the Mag 7 that's up. Apple, it's funny how this plays out, right? Apple has been the one Mag 7 to not really get a lot of play out of the AI, right? Everybody's been talking about how they're falling behind in the AI race. That seems to be working in their favor here this morning. They are up almost 1.75%. We are seeing the initial buy here on NVIDIA this morning as we open up. That 126 handle got thought up pretty quick, got back up to 127.34 here fairly quickly here. So a pretty big move to the upside initial here on NVIDIA. Tick is slightly negative now. QQQ is down right about 3%. That seems to be the spot here. So it's battling in this 513.55 area. With this gap down, you've got some decent room. Upside right now, my first spot to keep an eye on any kind of strength here this morning on this buy the dip would be the 50-day MA at 517.33. So that's what I would be looking at here. Going back into earnings a little bit, tomorrow we have a ton of earnings hitting. You've got Polaris, Royal Caribbean, GM, Kimberly-Clark, Xerox, Invesco. Boeing one I'm definitely going to be looking at, Lockheed Martin, Cisco, RTX, JetBlue, and others. Then on the 29th, you guys know I've been looking at some of those Japanese trading companies. One of them goes on Wednesday, SMFG, which is Sumitomo Mitsu. ASML has earnings to keep an eye on there. T-Mobile, which has earnings that day. Also keeping an eye on Brinker that day. We also have Meta. So we have a lot of earnings. Microsoft on Wednesday also. So we do have a lot of earnings coming up here this week that are going to be key to what we have going on. Got to talk a little bit about U.S. Steel here this morning too. They are under a little bit of a fire from activist investing company Ancora, who bought a stake in the company and is looking to replace 9 of the 12 board seats and put a new CEO in place. They want the company to abandon its deal with Nippon Steel, take the $256 million penalty that Nippon Steel would face for the merger not going through, and use that money to basically get itself as attractive as it can be for a future purchase by another. Mostly, it seemed like they were leaning towards a U.S.-based buyer, and they want to put a new CEO in place, Alan Kessenbaum. The thing there is he had taken over a Canadian steel company and made them very ripe for takeover, sold them for a lot of money to Cleveland Cliffs, one of the larger steel companies, still U.S.-based. So there is a little bit of talk about that. We are seeing a little bit of a sell-off here again. We're now down back a little bit more than 3% here on QQQ. So we are seeing that initial buy the dip mentality selling off a little bit here. That's why, like I said, I'm going to keep an eye on the market this morning and be more looking here, once I get off the air, and how I'm going to trade from there. Bitcoin wasn't able to hold above that 101 level. It has pulled back to 108.53 here. Gold holding up at that 27.50 level. If we take a look at the SPIDA indexes here, we know they cover the 11 sectors of the S&P. We do see that there's 4 of them opening up to the green. Consumer staples up about 1.7%. Healthcare up about 1.46%. And real estate up about a 0.5 percentage point. As we talked about, biggest loser so far, technology down almost 4%. We also see utilities down over 2.5%. So definitely those that were feeling that they were under indexed into some of those, you could look to pick them up on this dip here this morning. So again, I want to see what happens a little bit before I jump in one way or the other. NVIDIA down about 11.5%. So after making a run back up, it is pulling back. Microsoft, we see down over 4% here. VRT really getting hit here, which is Vertiv Holdings down over 20% here this morning. So another one down towards key support here in this 115, 112 area. Could get interesting. Constellation Energy, again, a high flyer over the last month or so. Basically since January 1st, it made that move up from 222 to 352. Pulling back here, now down 290, down about 16.5%. Vistra getting hit even harder. Nuclear play here down 20%. It actually filled its gap fill. So we talk about this a lot, right? Somewhere in the vicinity of 90 stocks eventually fill their gaps to the upside or downside. We saw this gap up here on January 2nd. It was able to even gap up again here last week. We see that it filled that gap down here right to that level of 150 or so, got down as low as 147.59, has started to gain a little bit of strength here, but you got the 50-day MA above it. I would need to see it regain that level for me to look for a play back to the upside here. So for Vistra, I'm actually going to set myself an alert here because I am interested in this. So I'm taking a look on Vistra here. I'm going to see if it can cross the 50-day SMA. If it does, I have an alert set here for it to get me. I want to take out these old alerts that I had. Forgot to do that this morning. I was also interested in Marvell. I'm going to set, there goes the alert. It just jumped through it already. There goes the jump by Vistra. Unable to hold above it, but it did just hit it. So it's trying. What is that? 50-day MA. It didn't hit it. It's 155. Oh, I know why. It's doing it for the trading session. I got to adjust this here. Here we go. Now we'll give it the right signal. Okay. So Vistra is one I'm interested in, but as we can see, we're seeing continued sell-off here off some of these. QQQ has regained 514 though, so moving up. Bitcoin back above 101. So we are seeing the bulls trying to take a little bit of control here. NVIDIA. Seeing some serious volatility of about $5 a share. Got down as low as 123.64, got up to 128.39 before pulling back down. So we are definitely seeing some volatility here. Apple up about 1.77%. Microsoft continuing to slide down here, down about 3.6%. Google down about 3%. Tick is positive, and we do see advanced decline moving closer to neutral by almost 1,000 here. VIX has pulled back here, so I didn't really get a chance to do anything there. I did sell out of the VIX that I bought, as I mentioned, when it was down at 15 on Friday. I talked about it. I did get out of that. Was looking to short it maybe today. Looks like I waited too long already. Back down around 1929. I wanted to get it up around that 22-23 area, so I didn't really get the opportunity there to short that VIX. Steve Flanagan telling us, don't buy that dip yet. Don't step in front of that train track and yell stop. Yeah, I can't argue. Like I said, I'm going to let this play out. Personally, I am interested in buying the dip. It's just a matter of when that dip stops dipping. We will see what we get in front of us. And I do think, a lot of it is going to be, I don't know why this can keeps on beeping at me when it's not doing what it's supposed to. So I'm going to pull this off because it didn't go above 155. I know why it's doing it, because I have it on the daily chart, not on the hourly chart like I should have. Advanced decline now, trying to get down to only down 1,000. We do see tick up about 400 here, so we are seeing a little bit of strength come in. We have seen QQQ move up over a percentage point here on the open. We're down less than 3% here, trading at about 514.73. So it does seem like traders are getting a little faith that there is a little bit of a run to be had today. We'll see how that plays out here. I want to take a look at volume across QQQ so far. Do see some pretty high volume here this morning so far. So right in ranges. So we're right in the ranges we should be. What I was looking for is, you can see the big drop when we had that exasperated drop back here in the middle of December. What you also had was a huge volume spike. It was almost twice the volume that we normally see in any given hour across QQQ. So that's what I'm going to sort of be keeping an eye on this morning. Do we start to see a huge spike in volume? Because then that would worry me about that drop that Mr. Flanagan's warning about there a little bit. We're not seeing it so far, and the tick continues to go positive here. So, my thing, as I said, is I don't trust the Chinese government or what comes sort of out of there, at all. So I'm not buying the DeepSeeks as good as they say it is and cost as little as they say it did. We'll see more. I have not played with it at all. I also would advise anyone that does download DeepSeek, that you're, keep in mind the same way that TikTok, they say, China's government was getting all of your information, all of your stuff, DeepSeek would be very similar to that. So, while I will play with it at some point, I will probably do it on a, what we call a VPN browser. I will probably do that separated from my other stuff. So, I have crypto wallets and other things that I don't necessarily want active while I'm looking through that, AI created abroad. So, and then to be honest with you, I would do the same thing with a new US large language model AI program. Also, when I first used Chat GPT, I did that in a VPN area on an older computer that isn't connected to all of my crypto wallets and such then. So that is always best security practice there. So I do want to warn that is what you want to do. Okay, let's see what we've got moving on for pumpers here this morning. We do see Kramer talking up the deep seek here this morning on CNBC and talking more. It looks like CNBC talking about the exasperation of the slide as opposed to any buy the dip here. So it looks like they are focused more on the continuation to the downside here. And as we can see, chip sector just absolutely decimated here this morning. NXPI, MCHP, a couple of the ones that are positive. I did say I wanted to look this morning to see if there was any news as to why they were moving up when everything else was moving to the downside. Don't see any news here from TradingView. They don't have earnings until later this month, or next month, actually. MCHP, let's see, they're up about 2% here this morning. So again, you do see some of the semiconductor chips companies that are moving to the upside. It isn't a large amount of them, but there are a few winners. And again, that's not towards the earnings either. So not really sure why those are moving to the upside. Texas Instruments, we know, did have earnings late last week on Friday. They're up about 0.5%. They had been hit pretty hard already going into the weekend based upon their less than stellar earnings. So not that surprising to see that sort of move to the upside there. I did want to see, we got some restaurant earnings coming into play this week, led by Brinker, which is EAT, Eat. So I will be interested to see what happens sort of in the restaurant sector as that comes up. They mostly seeing some pretty good green. So seeing green across a lot of the restaurants and a large swath of the ones that were down last week, seeing some love. McDonald's, Chipotle, Yum, QSR, Dryden, Texas Roadhouse, and Wingstop, some of the ones leading there. Same thing, Domino's. Dave & Buster's up about 4.15% today. We know they had been under a lot of pressure last week, was down significantly. So they have bounced back pretty well from that, drop January 17th. They went down as low as $22, now back up in that 28 zone. So they've seen a little bit of love. FWRG, which is First Watch Restaurant Group, up about 5%. So we do see some restaurant groups moving to the upside here today. I did notice, too, that Cisco was up earlier, which is a food supply company, largest that there is in the U.S. here, provides many restaurants, hospitals, and such. They are up about 1.83% here. And again, they're going into earnings tomorrow. So we'll see what they get there. But Cisco, nice move up over 2% now to the upside. Mixed bags when it comes to banks today, financial sector. Looks like most of the banks, well, Bank of America and Wells Fargo up slightly, but the other ones look to be foreign banks that are up further. VRT continues to slide. Vistra still sliding down almost 20% here. They do seem to be finding a little bit of a bottom. I will say to the upside, what we see AT&T getting a nice run here on their earnings report, up 6.1% here. They did get as high as 24.34 earlier this morning, now trading at about 24.17 right now. DHI, which is DR Horton, now up 3.16%. They had been down almost a percentage point, full percentage point, a little over that, based on news or analyst downgrade from bank JP Morgan. So that's a little surprising to see that move to the upside. As I talked about, two chips companies moving to the upside while everything else moving to the downside are MCHP and NXPI. Broadcom, Marvell, GEV, PCG, all still getting beat down pretty hard. ANET down almost 16% here this morning. Mag 7, not seeing a real big recovery yet. As we talked about, NVIDIA sitting right around that 126.56 zone. Did get as high as 128.40 right just after open, but that is sell-off has come, sitting right around VWAP right now. So it's still in play here. Could see some, short-term little choppiness here on NVIDIA as traders play out the war around VWAP to see who can take control. Tesla has earnings later this week, was down a little over 1%, was down actually further than that earlier this morning, down around 393. It's made a pretty good move up here since the open. So we are seeing a little bit of love since the open here. First 20 minutes have been fairly positive. With that being said, QQQ is still down 2.85%, but as we know, it was down over 3% earlier this morning. It is making a little bit of a run back up. 515 now, was down as low as 501 in pre-market trading, down as low as 510 earlier here in our trading hours. Same thing, SPY's down about 1.63%, now back below the 600 level. We know the SPY had hit an all-time high 605 area, I want to say, last week before this, little bit of a pullback. 610 was off there. That's right. 622 is my next target to the upside we were looking at. But yeah, we're not seeing a huge amount of positive movement so far. Tick is staying positive. Advanced decline is coming close to neutral, only down, negative 318 here. Bitcoin challenging to get back above 102 here. So again, does look like you got to be looking to buy that dip on Bitcoin anytime it drops below the 100K level. That was sort of my lead this morning. Is that the case? It does look to be the case. And we are now seeing some of the biggest losers of the alt market this morning moving back up. Solana, as I had mentioned earlier, was down, trading around 220, back up around 235 here. Ripple was in the 275 area, trading down from highs around 350 last week. It is making a move up. Don't see any that are continuing to really move to the downside so far. And I would say that I would probably, if you had to ask, I'd be putting money more into alts right now if you're looking for a scalp than Bitcoin at this level. Not that Bitcoin won't rise up, but I think you'll see a bigger percentage move to the upside out of the alts. You can see that the alts did find some nice support here. Right around that $943 billion range. It dropped down to overnight here yesterday or earlier this morning. So we do see that support clicks in right around that level. And now it's moved back. And as I told you, I am a seller once it hits that 1.1 level. I tend to put my money back, or I rotate back into Bitcoin at those levels. So we're in the middle here. I would still be looking for the alts to make a move until we see this move back up to about $1.1 trillion. Again, this is total 3, which is the crypto market, excluding Bitcoin and Ethereum. So I would be looking for a little bit more of a recovery, maybe out of Solana, XRP. Cardano was another one I was looking at a little bit this morning. AVAX, Avalanche was one I was looking at this morning. So those are sort of the plays I would be looking at on a buy the dip opportunity on the crypto side. And we do see the tick up now, 575. So again, we are seeing buyers move in here. I did feel that was the case here this morning. That's why I did buy a little bit more NVIDIA pre-market. Lowered my cost to average there. I am neutral outside of that. I did, as I said, I got out of my Bank of America and my MicroStrategy positions on Friday, both at profit. We'll see here. I'm looking to get back into MicroStrategy. I was hoping, well, I don't like to use the word hope, but I was looking to see if we'd get a little bit more of a continued drop on MicroStrategy that we are seeing here this morning. I would play that with MSTU, the 2X north side play there. But I want to see it down right about that $10 level, maybe even as low as $9.50 for that opportunity here for a play back up towards the 50-day MA. But I do like MicroStrategy here today. On the Bitcoin mining side, Mara down at 1903. Needed to break through this 200-day MA and hold for me to get a position there on Mara. It spent a decent amount of time under its 200-day MA here in, early January. And then throughout most of the fall, it spent time under that 200-day MA. It really only made the spike after they announced during their earnings report that they were switching to a Bitcoin treasury, very similar to what we saw out of MicroStrategy. At that point, we did see that's when it spiked up above its 200-day MA here. So I want to see a break of 200-day MA where it's sitting at right now and a hold. And then I would be interested maybe on Mara to the upside play. Mara is one of, if not my favorite in the Bitcoin mining company. It is Fred Thiel, Peter Thiel, his brother of PayPal fame, that runs that company. He is a very staunch Bitcoin maximalist. And again, he is moving them in the direction of a Bitcoin treasury, similar to what MicroStrategy does. And Bitcoin retook 102 here. So crypto industry definitely moving to the upside so far. QQQ seems to be stalling out in this 515, 516 area here. So we haven't been able to make a full recovery this morning. Did get up, I want to say, to 518 before pulling back a little bit here. No, 515.88 was its high. So trying to break back above the 50-day MA here and actually at its highs of the morning. So we are seeing, again, continual move to the upside here out of QQQ. And that is not being led so far from NVIDIA, that's still down 11%. It's actually Tesla that was down much further this morning, that's moving back up a little bit. And some of the others on the MAG also sort of leading this move back up, but not NVIDIA so far. And again, you can see Microsoft towards highs of the day also. Google not quite towards highs of the day, but a lot of them are approaching back towards highs of the day. I'm just trying to think if there's anything other takeaways here that I had before Mr. Flanagan jumps on with us here at 10 o'clock. Those are the big ones. I might be looking, if I'm looking for a fade here, if we see a market correction to the fade side, AT&T on its strong earnings, it was up as high as 24.34 here earlier, now at 24. You could convince me there maybe. I do think DH Horton, which is up about 3.43% this morning, I would also be looking at that as maybe a, sell the pump on that and maybe look for a short on some of those. So those are the two that I sort of would be looking at on a more of a short side here. And I'm sort of in a wait and see area right now this morning. Tick is Tick has gone positive, advanced decline now up 140, 150. So we do see animal spirits are coming in this morning. We are seeing the bulls take control. Bitcoin above 102 here, gold back above 2750. So we are seeing that VIX has dropped back down pretty significantly. It was up over almost 45% earlier, now only up 25%. So a pretty significant move to the downside there. I do see that Mr. Flanagan has joined the room, so let me pull up our DXY and get him in here to talk about everything going on in the world of Forex. How are we doing today, Mr. Flanagan?
Good morning, Howard. Morning, viewers, and a volatile day ahead.
Yeah, volatility, you could sort of see it coming. DeepSeek, I don't know. I mean, I get it. It's just, if it's even half what they're saying is true, the cost of it were a lot less than what we're seeing out of the US based companies. But as you've spoken about in the past, trusting sort of the Chinese government or officials to give you data numbers. And in this case, sort of saying, yeah, we did this without NVIDIA chips and we did it on our own and it cost $1.50. I don't know if I'm buying all that.
Yeah, well, I'll use my past experience here. And on days like today, obviously, you're reading the news all night long, you're seeing the futures markets. I'd always try to have a song that I would bring into mind, which kind of put me in the trading framework as I would sit down in a very busy money center bank. And I said to myself, blood, sweat, and tears. What goes up must come down. Spinning wheels got to go round. And what it does is it gives me a focus on the day. And Howard, I think you have been bang on with your analysis there. And here's what I'll say. One, China's economic stimulus, blah. The second round, blah. The markets, what have they done? Yep, a lot of fanfare in the wording that comes out, but has proven not to be very trustworthy. So I'm trying to find an analogy that I can use to explain this. Yes, the market's down, and it's down big, but you got to have patience here. I use the analogy of the 1970s and 1980s when Japanese cars came into the marketplace. They were tin cars. They were automobiles, but they were made of tin. Very simple. And everybody realized that after they bought them for so much cheaper, they realized, okay, it got me from point A to point B, but it really wasn't very
It wasn't
stable.
comfortable and it wasn't going to last more than a year.
And they would tip over in a strong wind. So
yeah,
how I look at that is very similar to this. It's a simple model. It does simple things and it's cheaper. But you've got Meta, you've got all these companies putting 20, 50, 80 billion dollars into investment. If in fact this is on the free space that the world can operate, then everybody's going to take it and quickly implement it. Well, maybe not implement the exact same, but they will re-engineer the process and come out that much more sophisticated. So it is a buy on the dip strategy. The dollar index has come right to the zone we talked about. Yeah. 106, I think 97 was our low. And we're presently around 107.10. 106.60, 107 the figure. This is the area to be looking to get back into a dollar index play because it still is a dollar worldwide play.
I want to just go backwards for 1 second there to highlight something that you said for our viewers that might not understand. So this is going to be this is what's called an open source program. It means they share the code and they allow anyone to use it as sort of a basis. It's very much the way crypto is built, very much blockchain technology sort of push this to the forefront. GitLab is a company that's publicly traded that is, the forefront of that. And, like you said, I said earlier, it's like the Sputnik moment, right? to me, all this did was wake up Sam Altman and Elon and these folks and say, hey, guess what? They're closer maybe than we all thought. And we better get our stuff together. And we better talk about open sourcing together like they have spoken about, Perplexity and C3 and all these have talked about getting together and having some shared resources, because it makes no sense to build every part of this alone. So that's what I'm hoping. That's why, for me, I think this is a moment where the U.S., says, okay, you think you're good? Let's show you what we got, China. We're going to Mars first.
Brilliant. But I'll take it one step further. We just had an announcement of a collaboration.
Absolutely.
Of $500 billion.
Absolutely.
Well, I think the U.S., I think these guys have already seen this coming. This is no shocker to those that are on the inside.
Yeah, it's to the investors. It's the retail investor just thought, it had been hearing China didn't know what to do. They weren't getting any chips, so they couldn't be manufacturing anything. And we all know that they get their access to their chips and they do their stuff. And, but like you said, hey, I wanted to get right into Japan with you, if that's okay, because
yes, let's do it.
We talked about it on Friday, very muted move. And I use it as an analogy for what I saw out of Shanghai this morning, right? Shouldn't that news, and that's the other part for me that I'm taking away, shouldn't the Shanghai Composite have jumped up this morning on that news?
Well, I believe that they're still closed, right? Because of the Lunar New Year. I'm not
well,
sure.
They were up. No, because his movement, it was down 0.06%.
Okay, so then perhaps activity is, as you say,
it's just light. Yeah, they might be open, and it might only be foreign traders doing, because this is the American depository version of it, I guess.
Right.
No, it's just a daily. It's just a daily.
Yep. So, but I think we've got the numbers out of China overnight were weak again. So I want to take this in a very simplistic view here. This was okay. Wow. Hey, they are getting closer into the AI space, but is it going to be able to continue as their economy has been cratering?
Right.
That's
Absolutely.
a big difference. We've got to keep it, in a very simple approach here. You've got a growing economy here, and you've got all this money and stimulus coming in. I don't see any announcements of stimulus out of China. I don't see any $500 billion infrastructure developments.
Yeah.
So I think maybe what China has done here has rung the bell and said, hey, don't forget us. With all this money pouring into the U.S., hey, we're over here too. You can pour that money over here too if you've got it to go. But,
it also took everybody's focus off of TikTok, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So that's the other part of this. And, as I pointed out, I will play with this at some point here this week. I'll do it on an older computer that's not connected to my crypto wallets, not to my bank accounts, not to any of that stuff, because I don't trust this stuff. I've seen it in the past with crypto projects, not with, I won't, say in the mainstream thing. And I don't necessarily think that TikTok's stealing all of our information and feeding the Chinese government, but it is. So I do warn people that, I also saw on CNBC, they had both a Republican and a Democrat on this morning, both voicing alarms that we want to make sure that this isn't just further, surveillance of Americans from foreign, companies.
Right. And to understand, I think, having been in the center since 2014 and 15, when we were actively involved, this is all about owning the data.
Yeah.
Because data is what drives models. And that's why, up on the top, we hear all this noise pollution about, well, this AI model, it's all about having data. So if one is able to secretly implant and take data, that would be a serious, breach of confidentiality, et cetera. So, yeah, that's a big concern, but it's about the data. And I think from a U.S. or a European point of view, nobody wants to see their data escape from the model.
And I do want to point out, with that being said, Quasar Markets, RAI, connected directly to NASDAQ for their information, connected directly to Edgar, connected directly to the Fed. So we get our data for our AI directly out of the databases that come directly from those markets to give you that edge that you're looking for.
Exactly. And that's a key. That's a big key and a big selling feature. So, I do believe what we have on the plate this week. We know we've had Bank of Japan. They moved a 0.25% to a half. Market was muted, but then you throw in a little bit of a factor of a down market and look at the yen surge. I do believe that we want to get long yen. Again, we say whether it's against the dollar or if it's against a European currency, that's up to you to decide how to play that. I like being long yen in a bigger picture. Then we have ECB on Thursday. Before them, though, is the Bank of Canada and the Fed on Wednesday. Probably they're both going to remain on hold, which is, in my mind, is a bad decision.
Yeah.
But then you've got ECB expected to cut a 0.25%. Are they going to surprise the markets with a 0.5%? That would be my take. I would think that they're going to go 0.5%. Now, that would drop them down to 2.5%, expected to go 2.75. But still, the interest rate differentials between the U.S. and Europe are continuing to widen.
Yeah.
The reason I point this out is that the Eurodollar is 54% of the dollar index. So if the Eurodollar drops, the dollar index is going up. I love the dollar index in this 40 to 50 point range here. And then next week we have sterling, the Bank of England, 4.75% presently. Next Thursday, a week from this Thursday, that is, will they go 0.5% as their economy has been cratering? Now, you could jump on some of the leading indexes or the IFO in Europe. Germany's IFO showed and expectations were higher, 0.2% higher, coming from a dismal level. So I'm pushing those aside. I'm looking at the bigger macro picture. I think the dollar index is to be bought. Right now, we're waiting to see how this market digests this DeepSeek news. And I think it will be a brief sell-off of a day or two. And then all eyes are on earnings and the Fed.
Yeah, I mean, and so far the sell-off already happened. We're moving. We continue to see us move up here. We actually see advanced decline now in the positive. So, more companies are up than down today. And it does look like people, as they're digesting it, and I think we have the right setup. There's a huge amount of earnings, and we've got Meta, we've got Microsoft, we've got Tesla. We have some of the big companies across most of the major indices sectors that are reporting this week outside of financials, and I think that's going to give us a little bit of an indication too, and maybe, calm people's nerves. Because I will say, fear and greed was at a low that we hadn't seen in about 20 weeks, so almost a half a year this morning. But as we can see, the markets seem to be digesting the news now and calming down a little bit.
Right. And, for the viewers, having traded 43 plus years now in the markets, it's important on days like today. You don't have to trade. It's let the market breathe. Let the market digest this move. If, in fact, it quickly spits it out and goes right back to normal, then you are presented with great buying opportunities. However, if this news sticks, and as you say, those indexes were so low that we haven't seen in a long time, then let it breathe out and look for the opportunity to step in. And that's what I point out in foreign exchange. I point out the dollar index. This is the level we've been waiting for.
So it's time, yeah. I mean, and I guess I would ask you to have a much better feel for this than me. I'm seeing bonds also being talked about a lot in, the media today. Bond yields going back up a little bit, giving some, strength to that sector. Do you see, could that be what we watch also? Because, if this shift happens more at a retail level, then we'll see more monies come out of U.S. equities and into these bonds and other, fixed income streams. Or is that just wishful thinking by bond traders?
Well, I think it's wishful thinking as bond traders
Okay.
because
That's why I asked. You have a much more experience with it than I do, and so does Big Beat. So I come to you guys on those
yeah,
type of things.
I think the place to be is equities. You're going to have these periodic points of time where corrections occur, and it's a natural thing. Corrections are good for
Right.
a longer term view. Um,
Absolutely.
and as I said, the dollar index, as the dollar index goes up, interest rates are coming off. Market interest rates will come off. They may not one day to the next, but in general, they will. And I think if you look at yields today, you've already seen a fairly large move lower in yields. So
Yeah, we have. We see about a 1% move to the downside on the 30-year, or 1.34% move to the downside on the 10-year, getting back to those levels, the lower levels that we saw again over the summer.
5% was silly. We talked about this a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, how much money was moving into the US to capture a 5% yield in a world where interest rates are declining.
I will say the 10 years got some real strong support at that 450 right now. So it seems like your trading range might be between that 450 and 475 area for the next couple of weeks, in my little humble opinion there.
And I wouldn't disagree with you. However, we do have durable goods and consumer confidence tomorrow.
This week, yep.
The Fed comes on Wednesday. If they do nothing but they indicate dovishness, and then you've got PCE, the Fed's favorite, on Thursday with GDP, jobless claims. And then the core PCE, which is the Fed's favorite, comes out. So a lot of news ahead. I do
Yeah,
agree.
huge week economic calendar, huge week earnings reports. I think it's, fasten your seatbelt and get ready for the ride. There's going to be some fun volatility for traders. This is a week we live for, right?
Right. And watch your dollar, because the dollar index will quickly tell. You already see the dollar index moving back up. It's come off because interest rates, the 10-year was one, but two, it came off because the fear factor that the U.S. is suddenly falling behind in the A. Look at your headlines. I mean, oh my goodness.
Yeah, the world's ending. Like I said, DeepSeek is the AI race is over. It's already been won. There's nothing left to do. We don't need energy anymore. There's no need to improve the infrastructure. That's all done. That's what I'm saying. That's why for me it is a buy the dip.
Yes,
It might not be a buy the dip this second, but this is a buy the dip opportunity. The thing I will warn our viewers, though, when you're looking at the more speculative areas, the AI companies and the nuclear energy companies versus your chip companies and your Constellation Energy, maybe, I don't like to give names as a winner or a loser, but those companies that have more of a broader spectrum and make money already and have that infrastructure. If they're an energy company, they're already providing energy to people. Those are the names I want to get in on now for a longer term play. But I'm not afraid to scalp the ones that maybe aren't profitable yet, which are the AI companies and the nuclear energy companies. Just be very nimble with those trades.
Precisely. And quantum computing, another area that you have to be nimble. But I do think that just last week I thought we were still in a chip shortage. So why would you be selling off chip stocks when
like I said, I bought NVIDIA this morning. I made it clear I was already in a position, so it just made sense to cost average down on it. It's a long-term look at, the next 6 to 8 months. It's my one, every year I basically pick a company and say I'm riding it for most of the year. I probably should have done NVIDIA last year or the year before. It's the one I'm choosing right now. I just think it's going to be the first $4 trillion company and all that type of stuff.
That's right. And don't forget, the first headlines we saw were tariffs to Colombia. And now that seems to be off the table. So
yeah, I actually I didn't even put it up across the screen, so that's a great one for me to do here. Yeah,
that was also a big negative in with this DeepSeek, and I like to say, watch currencies. Money moves first. Look at what the MEX did on Friday. It closed at 2025, and the first price in Asia today on all this was 2048. So over a 25 big figure move. It's traded up as high as 2058, still in our range. I always say watch MEX because so much money is in that currency at a 10% yield. So when people are unsure, the big people are unsure of what to do with their $10 billion, MEX is a great alternative. It is an actively traded currency pair,
Right.
and currencies trade 24/7, 5 days a week,
With huge
seven and a half
liquidity.
$7.5 trillion in 1 day trades in the currency markets. So when people are looking, watch MEX. 2002 is the downside. A break of that will have a spill on effect, and 2088 on the top will yield enough. So those will have offsetting moves across many of the financial markets if those levels begin to break.
Yeah.
So that's what I wanted to really point out today. Keep your eye on the yen, presently around the 154.30. I still like being long yen. I think it's a great way to trade in this market. The yen is a safe haven currency. So
Right.
in times of high volatility, you might want to look at the yen as an option. And this is just from 43 years of trading on a frontline
Yes.
desk.
Yeah, we are so lucky to have you here with us 3 times a week to give people this insight, not only on a currency level, but I also look at you as our sort of macroeconomic expert here that watches all of the markets. So thank you so much for that. Do you have our final words for the day?
Yep, money moves first, and good luck to all. Have a great week. A lot of volatility ahead, a lot of opportunities to trade.
Thank you so much, Mr. Flanagan. I do want to thank everybody for joining us this morning. I am back at noon with Agnieszka Wood, our trading mindset coach. She has a huge seminar later today that we want to tell you about. You can still sign up for her webinar. And then at 1 o'clock, we have Prosper Trading Academy, Scott Bauer, live from the floor of the SIBO. And we'll see you tomorrow morning with Big Beat at 9 a.m. here on Quasar Markets Live. Happy trading, everybody.